right.
Madam Chair, you can convene us. There we go.
Thank you, Lori, and good afternoon, everyone. We have committee members, Stephanie Knight, Ken Malcolmson, and Alan Cohen with us, as well as from the board, Lori Larea and Demetra Robinson and Connie Rash, as well as some guests from Child Care Group, our contractor. So we've got lots on the agenda today, so many things going on in the child care arena, as we all know, and love full agenda. So, again, as the purpose of this body is to educate ourselves as a board about childcare, and particularly in this rapidly changing environment, but also to think strategically long-term about how we can improve not only the access, but quality of care for kids across the region. So that is our major purpose. As I said, this is historical times in terms of the amount of resources coming this way for childcare, historical times in all kinds of ways, but certainly in that. So that being said, I will ask if anybody has any questions before we get started, and then I will turn it over to you, Lori, to start our agenda.
Thank you so much. Any other? Okay, didn't want to jump right in there. Didn't see any hands. Dee, if you want to put up the agenda, I don't know if it's in front of you. Or we can just go with whatever we're presenting. Why don't we just do that? Skip over the agenda and let's look at some information we need to share with the task force.
My apologies. I didn't have it ready to share my screen. So I have multiple screens going on over here and they're in different places. So give me a second and I can pull it up, but I'll start with the first thing on the agenda is the COVID-19 related funding and activities. And as we're all aware, there's plenty of money coming down for childcare activities and different funding streams through the CARES Act and the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act, as well as the American Rescue Plan Act. So we have about 4 different categories that the state has provided to us. Let me see if I can pull it up. It'll be so much easier if I can.
And I only had the drafty. I apologize. I don't think I got the final.
And in that first section is the same. I don't think I sent you the final either because I had notes written in there. But it'll be easier to share that screen with you because it gives you the outline of the timeframes with the money that is coming down to the state. And then I'll be able to break out what we're actually receiving at this time, or what we have already received and what's coming. So that's the plan that we have.
Lori joined us while you search. We can talk about the one issue so that she can get her issue in before she leaves.
Oh,
can we do that? Tori, thank you for joining us. Tori has been in touch with me today and with Dee and several over the weeks. And I voiced this to a bunch of large boards earlier, Tori, only to find out most of their executive directors do not have a clue this is going on. So with bringing in the service industry money and upping our number, what is it, 5,700 new kids in care?
Yes.
It's wonderful and the money is there, but if we don't have people working in the child care industry and creating room for more seats, we have a problem. And that problem will bring criticism to local boards because it's a workforce problem. We don't have a workforce. So Tori, just briefly outline your concern. You had 1 or 2 points. You're welcome to bring them all forward. We only give it about 5 minutes. So
sure. Well, thanks and hello, everybody. Well, Sherry and Rhonda and I talk about this daily, but what we hear weekly from our providers on the coffee chat that Rhonda hosts is they are all struggling for talent and hiring people. People are leaving the industry as fast as we can hire them. We're seeing it in our own programs. And we're not competing against other early childhood providers. We're competing against Buc-ee's and Walmart and Nebraska Furniture Mart. And I fear that particularly with this additional influx of serving 5,700 more children, that we will struggle to have the supply to meet the demand. And one of the overarching issues of this industry is frankly wages. And I say it on every stakeholder call that I'm on, but I would hope that we can use this moment to find a creative way to fix what's broken about this industry, which is that if we don't pay people a living wage, they will not want to work in this industry because they can go so many other places. They leave us to go, those that do stay in the industry go generally to the school district where they get full benefits and participate in the teacher retirement system. But I just feel like one solution that I spoke with Lori about this morning is, could we put childcare workers in a priority service category for subsidized childcare, so that if they choose to work for a childcare provider, they can enroll their children in a program, maybe not the program where they're working, but a program, and get fully subsidized care. That is one option. And we discussed, different variations on that solution, on that strategy. And the other thing is, how can we find a way to raise wages in this industry? And we know that the market pressures, we can't raise the wages so high that parents can't pay. But we really have an issue, and I would love for us to think out of the box about how we can find some solutions.
You would ask for some big ideas, revolutionize the industry.
This is the team to do it. I see all these good thinkers on the call. So, we've tried to float the idea of raising wages. The issue is sustainability. What happens after the American Rescue Plan funds are gone? We can't bank on the fact that the infrastructure bill will pass and create more support for childcare, but what can we do?
I appreciate that, Tori. And it truly is incumbent upon the workforce system to identify an industry that is unstable due to its non-competitive wage. It is. I don't know how we fix it, but we need to at least identify the concept, especially since it's a backbone industry. Imagine if DART were dependent upon rider payments to pay drivers. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't have a DART system. Half the time they weren't collecting rider pay. So it is out of balance in that it is a system that receives no government support except subsidized slots. That's it. It's gotten more support during COVID than I've ever seen to the industry, but that support did not solve the true issues. Which is people cannot prioritize childcare. Not all people will prioritize childcare in their budget to pay a premium. It is a values conversation. It also is a means and necessity. You've got to keep the roof over your head, the food on the table, the electricity on, and then you turn to childcare. What am I willing to pay, or can I afford to pay for the care of my children? And if you consider it babysitting, you minimize that conversation. Or if people rationalize that it's simply a place for your child to watch television or just be with other children, you tend to not pay a lot. And so our wages, or what would you benchmark them even in this competitive arena? Are we still at $10.50 an hour, or are we higher than that in childcare right now? Anybody? Sherry?
$10.50 is the average wage for Texas for childcare. I mean, that's across Texas. In Dallas, I believe, Sherry and Rhonda, correct me if it's wrong, it's a little higher in Dallas, but not much. As an agency, we've just gone through a huge salary adjustment for our own early childhood teachers to try to raise them up to, we've been trying to get to the 15. We haven't been able to achieve that for all all personnel, but it's a challenge.
To supplement what Tori has just outlined, I just came out of a meeting this morning. I serve as the chair of the HR committee for the board of the YMCA of Metro Dallas, and we obviously provide childcare as well. And we're down 100 people right now in our childcare space, 100. Now, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, because we're often down a large number, but not 100. And then the other issue, Tori, we had a long discussion about that this morning as well. I don't know if there is a silver bullet. I think, we're at $11 and we're going up 50 cents every 6 months, but that's not clearly enough. And so we're now having very serious conversations, just moving it right to 15 and just, and recognize that we have a significant issue. So the silver bullet, unfortunately, is just more money or some absent some federal intervention relative to a stimulus through an infrastructure bill.
Ken, that's a great setup for my next mention. I just want to mention that Eddie Bernice Johnson, Congresswoman Johnson's office, is in direct contact with the chamber. They have a work group. Dee, Tori, and I will be on those calls, but the problem is that the silver bullet is sort of looking back to say how many businesses can now support, invest, or house their own childcare. We're a little nonplussed by that one because we've been there, we've tried that. They've been, great efforts, unsuccessful. Basically the only thing an employer can do, in my opinion, is pay people more money to do their jobs and let them budget accordingly. That doesn't change the value conversation of what value people put on the childcare that they purchase. So we'll work with the Congresswoman, but I'm afraid it is one of these, we look to government, they look to private sector.
Yeah, it's
Not a solution. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we're compounding the problem, which we discussed at our board meeting last week, Lori, is this whole issue around the Great Resignation. I mean, obviously, that's what's happening right now across the board, where people are stepping back and assessing what they really want to do for a living and we've seen historically high numbers in both April, May, and now the June job reports in terms of number of people that are resigning their positions voluntarily. I mean, and so thinking that there's greener grass somewhere else.
Go ahead, Susan.
We have a lot of turnovers also. So we've got a short-term and a long-term problem. Is that what I'm perceiving? Short-term is because of the pandemic, we're having difficulties getting people in. Can we subsidize with this COVID relief fund during this period as a short-term approach while we figure out what we can do long-term, either subsidies from the private sector or our government funding?
Yes, ma'am. The subsidies have come down from the state since the inception of COVID. Beautifully done in many respects, but they didn't solve the wage issue. The state forwarded money to us to say, continue to pay for slots that were used as of March 1. Do not diminish them because the child is not showing up for care. So they suspended all attendance requirements. We paid for empty seats to keep the child care facilities and the wages coming. And it also prevented more people from applying for unemployment. I mean, there was a win in this for the state. Now what we moved to last summer and fall was getting CARES Act money from Irving, Dallas, and Dallas County to give subsidy to the providers, small little loans for those who were not well banked enough to take care of the federal grants. Now what we're looking at is a very successful project coming from the state. I don't know the percentage, Dee or Sherry or Rhonda may know. Childcare providers in Dallas County may receive a sum of funds up to, and I think for 100 seats, it's around $80,000 to cover expenses from January of this past year through August. And they have to support those transactions. But if they had paid people more to keep their talent, that money would have subsidized that. It's again the value proposition and the reality of cost of everything. Everything costs more money now in the childcare arena, particularly cleaning supplies, food, nourishing food. We've all seen the cost go off the charts. Sherry, how many or Rhonda, do we know the percentage of centers in Dallas County that have now registered for that benefit?
I think it was around 69.
I think that was in my head.
69.
Percent.
Oh, 69%. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
It's a hefty number. It's not the best number in the state,
Right.
but it's a hefty number for Dallas. So we think that centers really took advantage of this. Alan, you had a comment in the chat. You want to amplify that?
Yeah, well, I just I'm in total agreement with the spirit of the conversation. I also think we need to get beyond anecdote. And I just like if we'd be able to put a survey out very quickly, very, very simple, but for childcare providers that are taking subsidies, so we know the address of the childcare provider, that we know what that childcare provider is paying their employees today, so that we know whether they've lost employees over the last 6 months, and if so, how many, and last, if they believe they have enough employees to lead the existing sort of set of classrooms or capacity that they have, whatever the right wording is for that. But if we could figure that out, it does two things. One, it lets us, again, go beyond just sort of, I heard from somebody that and it gives us real, like real data to put this against, real information. And then the second thing is, I think solutions are going to require often on the ground some. It's not going to be a one size fits all policy solution always. And there's different resources and different spheres of influence in different parts of the city, and different buckets of money that could be opened up. But we need to know not just what the issue is, but where the issue is actualizing and who's being affected. And so this could just help us get some data to actually take some action.
Yeah, no, that was exactly my thought too, Alan, is could we quantify this? I think it's important to know for both subsidized childcare, and I know this is probably a bigger challenge, but childcare in general and staffing challenges, because, there's Lori, to your point around value proposition and employers, there's a different probably, and Alan, to your point too, there's a different set of solutions. So if my childcare serves people who are primarily paying for this service themselves, but they are my employer, their employers are real dependent upon them being there, that's probably a different set of solutions than for a center that is primarily serving subsidized families. Both are really important, but it's hard to dump them all in one bucket. But to me, Lori, the big issue is do we perceive, and I think we need to quantify that there's a workforce challenge in the childcare industry, and then kind of like start to segment it from there, because I think that's our theory, and I think it's backed up by lots of, as to your point, Alan, anecdotes that yes, that is true, but then now let's dig a little bit deeper into it, so then we can start to think about, okay, so how do you address these different challenges? Does that sound reasonable?
I mean, also, if you want to make it an issue, right? Like the article that gets written is based off of a survey, not based off of somebody told me that this is a problem.
Yeah.
Well, I have good data when it comes to job orders and pressure that we're having to host a job fair for the childcare industry. That's how bad it's gotten. So I will gather that data for you guys. A lot of it isn't really. I think what I like your questionnaire, but I would add something to number 3. If Rhonda and Sherry could capture these questions, how many employees have you lost over the past 6 months? But I really want to know, how many openings do you have?
Yeah,
right now?
how many openings do you have? Kind of like
I want both data points.
Yeah, right now I have 100
but then do you really not have talent right now, or you're just grousing because you're having to pay too much to get the talent and you're still in business? So that would be another key issue.
And so Tori and Sherry, is that something that can be operationalized? Is that easy enough to do?
Oh, yeah, it's real easy. We actually have done a couple of surveys that asked some of these questions. It was geared more around, if they had to turn away children, because they didn't have enough teachers in the classroom. Yeah, so I do have that kind of data. But yeah, it's very easy to do.
Yeah, and I think it's really critical that we make sure that we also get the address of each of these providers so that we can do some of the geocoding.
Yeah, that is real important, because it's if we can identify the areas, then that only helps us be able to see where those problem areas are.
Rhonda, what's the nature of the survey that's out right now? I see you've just answered.
Oh, it's what Sherry said. I mean, we're trying to gauge need for the job fair. So asking each provider, do you currently have openings? How many openings do you have for infant teachers, toddler teachers, and so forth? So yeah, and if they've had to turn children away.
And to be honest, to my members, my board, I was not in favor of a job fair. Only because this is a non-competing industry. The industry is at such a low level, and it's back to what Tori was saying. How do you hold a competitive job fair without some sort of hook?
Mhm.
We are fighting with retail. I believe somebody mentioned Nebraska. I think Nebraska has gone up to $20 an hour to get the best talent in retail. So if someone is trying to provide for their family, they're going to take those jobs if they can find childcare. Then we've got this whole conversation. If you're in the service industry, if you want to go to a hotel, you go work a bar, go work a restaurant and work for tips that are really good tips, and you come up with some money. It's almost difficult for me to teach the bad habit of, oh, but you're going to get free childcare for a year. Getting people to rebudget that is going to be the other conversation. If I could get it for a year, why not two? Every good thing can sometimes lead to some very negative conversations on the other end. And so this is something just like a house, paying your rent, paying a house note, you've got to work it into the budget. Transportation, you've got to work it into the budget. All too often, childcare is a really last thought for a family that's, not accustomed to this cost. And we see it every day when somebody gets kicked off because they go over income. They don't have enough money to cover what the government was covering. It's impossible. So I would like to do a little more research. I'm glad we're trying to save the service industry, but I'm very, very concerned about how we're going about it at the exclusion of any other industry. That's really a point. Yeah.
And like you said, Lori, I mean, it's childcare being a non-competitive industry. That should tell us something right there. Like, why? This is the backbone of the workforce. I always say the workforce behind the workforce. If we can't get childcare providers in programs, we can't do all the rest of the work that we have to do. So maybe, stepping back to the core issue, how is solving that. So that brings us to the other thing that I had called you about this morning was, can we entice people to get back into the industry or choose the industry or get trained for the industry with the idea that they can get childcare for their own children? And
we're going to cover the groups in a moment. That's part of Dee's presentation.
Good.
I don't really want to rush the discussion, but I know you need to leave.
No, I'm good till 2. Yeah.
Okay. So we have some conversation. I'm not particularly in favor of adding this as a priority because of how the state allows us to add it. We must cover their priority 1, priority 2. We get to add something to priority 3 that already has 4 or 5 priorities in it. And we have, do we still have 1,000 people on the wait list, Sherry?
About 2,000 kids. It's going up daily. Yeah.
You see my stress. To add a priority at the end of the road or even at the beginning of group 3 may be a false flag. So we were talking about perhaps other ways that we could raise the money or find the money in other government sources to say, if you're already in priority 1, can we entice you to become a child care worker in a work study program? Bring your child to work every day. You will have free childcare as long as you're employed in the childcare system. We can't do that based on individual childcare activity, but we perhaps could do that if we had private resource for a year, just to fortify the workforce in the industry. That's one of the things. We talked about signing bonuses. The providers are not enthused about that because there's no hook to keep them in the industry longer. I'll get my signing bonus and I'll stay here 30 days and I'm out of the industry. And so we don't want that manipulation. We would like something that engages people. And I think taking a 20-year-old and saying, if you come into the industry, we'll get you a credential, and your child, that exorbitant infant care will be paid throughout the time you work at that center or the center you select. To me, that may be the only inducement that is it's truly beyond a salary issue for that person without a credential who is young. It's finding them an industry inroad and paying for childcare until the child is old enough that the childcare cost comes down. And then there's a fighting chance for that mother to be able to qualify for a job and pay her own childcare or subsidized care and pay the copay.
What about flexibility of time? Can you ladder shifts, or does it have to be one individual working a specified 8-hour period of time or whatever it may be?
Good question, Ken. The majority of our centers are a 6:30 kind of conversation. You know, they want to pick the kids up before, or you want to pick them up before dark. We only have maybe 30 providers that have flex hours to work with. But
I'm not talking about the hours
You mean like-
we provide
like say
services.
working 4 hours a day or something.
Yeah,
whatever,
exactly.
8-hour
I'm
shift.
talking about the
I was
providers.
going to get there. I was going to get
Okay,
there.
okay.
We don't have enough workers to cover the basics of this. And I am worried about people working overtime without compensation as it is. So I think it would be great if we had those surplus. Rhonda is nodding. Am I on path here, Rhonda, that we are really down to a bare number of people in most centers?
Yeah, I mean, one of the concerns we've raised with this SIR funding is, you know, people that work in the entertainment industry, hospitality, don't work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
True.
So where are they going to find care?
Yeah.
And that's Ken's point. Do we have enough people that could work the swing shift, but they would have to work for a different employer or they would incur overtime?
Yeah, well, that too. Yeah.
It's a thought, Ken, of doing a job matching conversation where people can work their 40 hours plus hours at another care facility. Quality is upheld.
I was thinking more in terms of someone who said, you know, I have childcare responsibilities of my own and all this, but you provide them a shift that might be 4 hours long versus 8 hours long. You pay them $15 an hour and you give them free childcare during that period of time. Is that because today it seems like with this great resignation phenomena, the real value is in time. Time is more valuable to people, to many people, than money is.
No, you're right. And that's a great solution, I think, for the Head Starts and for ISD sponsored care. Tori, are y'all doing that in Head Start right now, flexing?
Not right now. No.
It would be something to consider to get
Yeah, well-
more people in the pipeline.
Well, and this is where the whole education, the training component comes in. We have talked about this with Dallas College about trying to get our teachers, the ones who are going from CDA to AA or AA to BA, can we work out a flex schedule so they go to class 2 days a week, still getting their salary full time, but they've got a trainee who needs their in classroom practicum hours and just switch. So, you know, and if we had relationships and consistency are very important in our classrooms. So we don't like to have that disruption, but if it's the way to get a teacher higher credentials, then it's one way to solve that problem. I think what we're talking.
What you're talking about, let me just clarify for Ken, you're describing workers in the industry who do not have the luxury of removing any hours from their schedule because they need the money. So the flexing of the hours, and I was going the other direction, which is they'd like to have 2 full-time jobs for the money. But you're saying that they would want to be paid for hours not in the center.
That's right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's something I think we really have to think about that because people do not have the bandwidth. They're stressed, working, providing for their families, taking care of little kids. That's been a barrier for some of our teachers to go on and pursue their degree because they depend on a full-time income and then they've got to go home and take care of their own kids. They just don't have the bandwidth to go back to school and do all those other things. So I've been trying to float the idea of saying, we'll keep you on the payroll full-time, but we're going to give you 2 days to go to class and you go get that degree. We'll put somebody in your place that'll be your permanent partner, your teaching partner, and they come in. Of course, there's lots of issues to be worked out, but that's one way. To Ken's point, and you and I talked about this morning, if we could take a CDA program and fast track it like the work study plan that you've mentioned, and fast track that CDA course and let them go to school intensively, get free childcare, and then they have to have an in-classroom component to complete their CDA, but maybe that's when they go and intern at a childcare center.
So I've kind of lost this. Are we talking two issues? One of them has to do with the wages and the other has to do with the professional development. Are they related in any way?
Tori's bringing up a third bar. It's a very important bar, and it's timely because Dallas College used to provide this credential training for us. The problem is it takes a very long period of time, and it seems in the Institute that we're looking for a high quality, longer term stretch. And we keep trying to tell them for workforce needs, we need them to compress the credential because we need more faster. I love that they're working with Gates and they're working on a high bar to bring 4-year credential to the industry of childcare. It's awesome. But for the moment, we need ready talent that'll work for $12 and $13 an hour. So we're competing against our best interest in our own community. Tori and I will take that up with the college and see if we can at least do a workaround in the workforce department. Dee, this would be for Gloria and Piper to, in the interim, give us the CDA, the basic credential for childcare workers, and let the Institute work on its longer term plan. So sorry about that, Stephanie. It does come into.
Well, is there a difference in the amount of pay? Is what I'm wondering. If there is a pipeline to more education, more degrees, is that a pipeline to higher pay?
And that's such a great question. And I think the answer is not really.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There, in some programs there is. I mean, it's not huge, but still we get back to the core question. The industry does not pay the same level of wages even than ISD would pay. So.
However, the thing it does matter, the most important situation right now, with more people with that credential, the center can qualify for a higher star rating, therefore get a better compensation from our system.
Yeah.
So think about that. More credentials in their system makes them eligible to be a 2-star, 3-star provider, provided they do other work. But without that, they're going to all kind of bottom out to the lowest reimbursement rate that we're able, or the subsidy we're able to pay. And that's devastating. It's like we're causing the problem to get worse instead of fixing it. So, Madam Chair, we probably need to turn it back to you, and I need to
no, thank you. Thanks. This was a great discussion. I do think, some key things I heard here. One, if we could, and Rhonda, it sounds like there are, and Sherry, pieces of a survey out there, but quantify this. I think not only knowing exactly how many, as much as we can, what is the problem that's out there? How, I love Ken saying at the YMCA, we know we have 100 openings. I'd like to know that as much as we could across the industry, at least ballpark when you get those surveyed. And then to Alan's point also, could we look at that in terms of, regionally or by zip code? So how do we know where the biggest problems are? I do think at some point it's also really important to understand that from centers that they're not, for the most part, or even not at all, serving kids who receive subsidies, because that's probably where you're going to see an even bigger pain point with higher level corporations. Yeah, if I'm JP Morgan Chase and my mid-level managers are quitting because their childcare center has no staff, that probably that tells me a different story than I am serving families in the service industry who are critically important, but you probably go about solving those problems a bit differently, and the resources available to solve those problems differently they're different resources, I think. So let's get as much information as we can to understand the problem.
Alan's question, if I could just answer. Alan, when I talked to Tori about a work study program for like priority 1 group, we talked about a very small pilot to see if it had any impact. So that was on the come to work, we'll pay full-time childcare, not a subsidy. We'll pay it out of WIOA funds or private funds. You go to school, you work, but no, we're not paying for hours. They're not in the center. We were just trying to find a way to use the people who are most likely to qualify for subsidy, but infuse them with an idea that they'd like to go into the childcare work for a period of time to offset the cost of their own childcare.
I'll just say, I just think we gotta be ready to start testing some stuff. And I don't like we often wait for the whole system to change off of an idea. And we just gotta know, like, could it work even in a single center? Could it work with a single person? And what are the challenges with that, so that we can, actually have a informed conversation. I'll also just say one other thing. The data will be very important, not only for sort of the direct activity with childcare, but there's a hypothesis here that keeps on getting pushed forward that folks are leaving other industries. The Great Resignation is tied causally to the lack of childcare, and that I'd say I think it's a strong there's strong reason to believe that that's a big contributing factor, but also strong reason to believe that that's not the only factor. And so we might be able to see places where there's a stronger correlation or relationship there than others.
Yeah. Yep. Good point. Okay. Thank you, Tori. Good conversation, and we'll look forward to more information. So Dee, let's hand it back to you and Lori. I think you were going to pull up and show us the funding streams with timelines, correct? Dee, I think you might be on mute.
There we go. Now I'm off mute, and now can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, let me see if I can even make it bigger for everybody. So this is the COVID-19 related funding that has come down from TWC that you are aware on some of them. The CARES Act, we've been operating under that funding for a little while with multiple activities, and I'll be able to show those activities to you in a few minutes. The funding dates are listed in the column, in the last column. That indicates that the state will obligate the money by September 2022 and has to be expended by September of 2023. And so I'll give you those activities under the CARES Act. The Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act funding has been issued as well with the same timeline. And then you have the American Rescue Plan Act. That goes into the following year. It has to be obligated September 30, by September 30 of 2023 and expended by 2024. So that one, we have a little longer span on it. So I don't think TWC has started issuing out most of those fundings yet. The last one, that is also available as well. And those are stabilization grants that are being administered through TWC. And so some of this is coming directly to the board, some is staying at the state level and being issued through the state. As you're aware, Lori had mentioned a few minutes ago, the application process for those providers, that was an activity done straight directly with the state, where the state was paying the providers those funds. It didn't run through the boards. And let me go down to the next page to show you some of the activities from the CARES Act that has occurred. Here we go. This 2.8 is part of the activities that have occurred already, that has started. The applications to more than 14 providers, that process has ended through the state application. And I believe that's what we said. We had about 69% of our providers in Dallas County that applied, that was eligible for the incentives there. The second group of projects, these are the the first four listed on this table, this chart here. Starting with these four here. Those are programs that are directly related for board activity that we will have our hands involved in. The service industry recovery, childcare, those are the funds we mentioned in our June board meeting that we received $55 million. That's for the service industry recovery, those specific to the service industry jobs. We got 10% of that money effective August 1, and then we'll get the remaining of the funds October 1. There is money coming for the Texas Rising Star support. That's $30 million for statewide. The 28 boards will receive that. We'll get $3.3 million on that. We have not received the money yet. There will be a plan that the state will ask boards for in reference to that, and that will be supporting childcare providers wanting to be a part of the Texas Rising Star system. The Texas Rising Star contracted slots, that's $20 million that's put on the table right now, and that will be a process where boards will have to submit an application or a plan on how we want to utilize those funds and be accepted. That is not a direct distribution to the boards. We will have to submit an application for that. And the early childhood apprenticeship pilot, that is a competitive application process that TWC issued. And I believe they've already gotten responses back in for that process. And I think Campfire of Texas is one of those providers for that project. Those four projects are things that we will have some involvement with. They don't go through our normal eligibility process. So I think that is what you need to know as well. The service industry recovery childcare is one that is separate. It's a separate pot of money. It's a separate performance target associated with it, and it's for separate activities outside of our normal childcare subsidy program.
And Dee, none of the service industry recovery doesn't have the quality set aside applied to it, right?
It does not.
Okay.
Dee, if I could ask, we specifically did not compete for contracted slots. We're not interested, or we haven't done the contracted. When does that close?
I think we have until November 30th.
Okay. There are people out there who want to take a shot at it. I'm open to it, but we got to find the right one to make this work correctly. And I haven't seen that yet. The apprenticeship pilot, I wish them well, but it goes back to Stephanie's question. Longer you train, more you stay in the system, would it equate to a gain in income? And I don't think that the time to be an apprentice would be rewarded commensurate with what goes into that effort. It's a really hard sell for me, unless it's in a school district that has a career pathway or in a Head Start system that has a career pathway, or extremely wealthy or centers that cater to people who would not be on subsidy. It seems to be a very strange ask. They asked me to speak to one of the commissioners who's behind this, and I couldn't figure out how to approach him. He is the squire of apprenticeship. He wants everyone in an apprenticeship, but I think he demeans the term apprenticeship to put it in childcare right now, while the system is just barely fumbling along and wages are not, they're not on the lattice. You cannot get that wage. I know a lot of directors who are saying that the childcare center director owners are not making the money that would be expected for that kind of input on a long-term education. So it's a hard sell. I hope they do well with it. I'll be interested to see where that comes from and what kind of composition they put together so that they can make it worth everybody's time and trouble. I'm envisioning a huge dropout number in year 2 if it's truly an apprenticeable skill. That's just me. The last thing, the TWC cost for program support, is that 501 ops working at the state level?
I'm not directly sure. That's a TWC cost, and it wasn't a description per se, but I think when they presented it to the commissioners, it was money that they were asking for at their level to do some things with supporting the activities from staffing.
Got it. Did we ever get a closeout from him?
We got part of the closeout for him.
Never mind.
Quick question, just so I know, the Rising Star supports, that is to increase sort of the level within Rising Star to bring people, are all the providers required to be part of the system now or still not?
It is not yet. That is one of the bills that was out there. And what the state will begin to work toward is the mandatory, but we're not there yet.
Okay, so I guess, do we have a goal like locally as far as like what we're aiming for that's like achievable on Texas Rising Star? Like, is there a certain number of Rising Star 3 or is it just based off of number of folks in the system? Like, do we have any goals that we've defined as a board?
We have not at this time.
I'd like to suggest that we think about defining sometime over the next couple of months, define some goals so that when dollars come in for supports, we have a framework for kind of how we evaluate whether or not we're moving towards or further away from a goal.
I appreciate that. I do want to make the point, right? Up until COVID, it was get as many 4-star providers as possible. And so the money was concentrated on the upper end and money concentrated on the bottom, trying to engage people. Rhonda, have we net loss or gain on our 4-star, 3-star, either one of those categories?
Right now, we're at a net loss simply because since February, we have not been able to certify any new providers at all because of the new TRS guidelines rollout. So we've lost a few due to either them closing or licensing deficiencies, unfortunately. We've been on hold for bringing any new ones in. We're just getting ready to start. We have to go through a process of reassessing and recertifying all the providers who are currently certified as TRS over the next several months. So that'll be the primary focus, get everybody recertified under the new guidelines, and then we can start bringing new ones in.
Do the higher tiered pay their staff better?
They can.
Do they though?
We reimburse them at a higher level, Stephanie. That's the whole point. We infuse the owner with more money.
Right, but does the owner
don't.
transfer that to the workers? Because that's a problem.
It is, but once you're a 4-star, you have to hold on to your certified people at multiple levels. So they could not retain that 4-star if they lose their trained staff. Would that be fair, Rhonda?
It is. There's not a requirement that they pay more, but we do know several that have shared that with us. One of the new requirements in this new TRS rollout is that they have some type of salary structure and retention plan in place. So we're hoping that that'll have some positive impacts. We're waiting to.
Do we know that they have fewer open positions? I mean, I'm thinking about these data that we're talking about and trying to make the case for either higher pay or something that will attract and retain.
Don't know for sure. That may be something we can quantify if we do this next survey, asking about rate of pay. We can add on, who is TRS, what level are they, to help identify that.
I think that'd be helpful to know if that is the problem or not. I mean, if we have some movement toward being able to fill positions if they're higher paid, then that might be a rationale for movement in other areas.
We have to remember these are predominantly independent, privately owned businesses, and that's where it runs afoul of restriction or limitations and restrictions that would cure the problem. Everybody who runs a business gets to do what they want to do with their funding. You know, we're not paying them for their operating costs. We're simply paying them for the slot for childcare at a very nominal rate. The other thing that concerns me out here is that we gather the data. We are still dealing with COVID. And so Rhonda, what do we have right now on 4-star? How many? 80, 60? What do we have?
Probably 80 to 90.
80 to 90. Okay. Which is not great.
Yeah, and percent wise of the total addressable market, what is 80 to 90?
11, no.
11%.
Yeah, probably.
Well, that includes day homes and stuff though, right? Yeah, so I may have gone too far. It may be a better number than that of the licensed childcare facilities, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You put it on that tracking sheet, Rhonda. I think we have, of all of the star providers, there are many more 4-star than 3 and 2.
Right. Right.
And
Because there's more on the line. They
Yeah,
get money considerably more.
They get more money and they're highly incentivized to remain there. I think the issue, and this is going back to what Alan said about setting a benchmark, I think that the challenge that we're going to face is since all the TRS, the state, assessment has changed and having to go back and reassess everybody, we're concerned about them, dipping their star level under the new assessment guidelines, and particularly in a post or a mid-COVID, post-COVID environment. So it's tricky.
So that's a great point, Tori. And I think it would be a mistake if we were to look at that and make a classification judgment that like the work has been good or bad based off of the change, right? That shouldn't, but I think we do need to know what the change is. And I mean, what I'd kind of request is maybe at each of these meetings, we could look at the number of 4s and the number of 3s that we have and sort of the change. And specifically, if we're seeing providers that are dropping down levels, I'd love to have a list of just which of those providers they are, because there's to Lori's point, right? These are independent operators, but that gives us an opportunity to focus group them and do a deeper interview and some different things so that we can figure out what's really happening. And likely, Tori, it's going to be stuff that is externally being created right now in this moment, but it hopefully could give us some information so that we could adjust faster and more intentionally.
Sure. No, great point. I agree.
Let me touch on something I witnessed yesterday. I sat on the first hour of a call that was scheduled for an hour and a half. And what I came away with is all of the good work done by really effective people in our community who went to bat in the session, and they brought about change, and they thought that change would lead to extremely good controls. And what I'm seeing is extremely ridiculous red tape and paperwork. The operationalizing of a legislative act can completely destroy the legislative act. And I'm having a problem, Alan, particularly, kind of what went down during the session, Susan, as well. Guys, you would not believe what's being made of that is so cumbersome, so tiring, so incumbent upon the owner to do more for less. It did not lead to what I think it was intended to create. Rhonda has her mic open. Would you agree?
Probably so, yes.
Just listening to what we're going to have to go through for people to be not mentors, but what am I looking for? The
assessors.
The assessors. Oh my Lord. The state has decided they will manage, I'm sure it's in the legislation as an intention, 1 to 7. And oh, by the way, then you have to ask for an exemption. it doesn't lead anywhere good at this point. It just looks like a lot of bureaucracy comped upon a very good idea that might have improved quality, but you can beat it to death with governmental red tape. So
I agree. I mean, okay, I really do. And I just think we got to get ahead of it though. And part of getting ahead of it is just knowing, you know, again, the metrics that everybody's going to be looking at, which in this case happens to be TRS. We just got to know what the very, very basic changes are. I mean, if that's cumbersome, like, please, by all means, I'd love to talk offline. I don't want to create a lot more work, but just being able to know, are we increasing, decreasing, and who it is that's falling in and out? And that gives us a chance to investigate so that we can paint a very realistic picture of the intent of the policy versus how it's actualized, and hopefully improve this. But that's all I'm trying to do.
If we just know where we are now, then we can start figuring it out and see what the impact is along the way. No, I think you're right, Alan.
I just wanted to say too that Alan, we believe that we created a quality tracking dashboard, and we're definitely looking at it month to month, and we're even comparing it month to month, the ads and the losses, and seeing exactly where they're at. And we even have heat maps that show us where the losses and the ads are. So we are on that 100%.
Yeah, thanks. And I think just, I'd love to be able to bring more people around that data and more people, you know, working on it. And we have resources, I know, in my organization to put against it. And so, and I know there's other independent organizations, and I think that's 100% the right attitude. This is just about let's focus on problem solving, not sort of accountability is the wrong word here.
I'd love to put out a data statement from this task force each month or every quarter that tells people what the data says, not just what the data is and where to find it, because we learned a long time ago, people who are not in the system could come away with extremely different decisions based upon what they think they're reading. So I'm all in, Alan, for data, but also a data expression. What do we think the data means, so that folks really get the message, and maybe even goes to, you know, I've got Mitchell Schnurman at the Morning News loves to call about workforce. I'd love to find someone similar who would like to talk about childcare and get that quarterly conversation with us going into the notes they're putting out to the public. I think that could help. Thanks for all that. Dee, you want to move on?
I do. And we can share the activities with all the money after the meeting too. Let's go on. Let me see where we are on the agenda. We'll go to the next thing, which is the legislative updates.
Mm-hmm.
And we briefed you on the 4 key childcare bills that are affecting us through Texas Workforce Commission. And Alan mentioned one was the making Texas Rising Star mandatory. That was House Bill 2607. And they're still in the development of that. These are also new, that it's going to take a little while. And it's also going to affect how our Texas Rising Star program is operating, as well as HB 1792, which centralizes all of the Texas Rising Star assessors. And the state is moving on that as well. And we are too. As you know, we have the contracted assessors that we share across 3 board areas, which is Tarrant and North Central. And we're actually issuing another procurement to recruit additional assessors because of the new changes to the Texas Rising Star program. It's requiring us to even have a lesser caseload per assessor. And with the sharing, it's going to make it more difficult for us to meet that need with having to reassess all of our providers that are in the Texas Rising Star program according to the new guidelines. So there is challenges all the way around with the new bills that are coming out and new rules that we will have to comply and align ourselves with. Senate Bill 1555 is relating to the reimbursement, establishing the reimbursement rates according to, we're changing the way we're doing it to align it with childcare regulation. So we are moving from TWC's 4 age group ranges to childcare regulation 8 age ranges. So that's a change for us on how the reimbursements will be reestablished.
Dee,
And
we're
that's
still
part of
seeing-
one of the Senate bills.
I'm sorry, dear. We're still seeing the money.
Oh, I'm sorry. I may take the money
Interrupt, but
off.
I'm looking at it going, I know she has another slide.
I do, and I'm telling you, I have so many screens, I don't know what I'm doing over here. Let's see if I could get this to you. These were the 4 that were presented at our last meeting. I'm just kind of giving an update on it, and I'll be able to do that. Only the last one was House Bill 619. That's related to developing the strategic plan. And that will come from TWC, and I believe they'll be working with some entity to do that. We just don't know who that is yet. So that is our updates on legislative. See if I could get it back up.
So it sounds like we are in the throes of rulemaking, which is always, yeah, legislation is one thing, and then making it into operationalizing it is always something else. Is there anything, and what I've heard from this conversation, or what I've gleaned, is that the rulemaking sounds like it's going to make things more complicated and cumbersome than it has been in the past. That's what it sounds like. That's me just making that's what I'm hearing. Is there anything that anyone could do to be helpful in that space to help streamline, make anything, advocate for anything different? And, maybe not, it may be that that's how it is, but I'm wondering if this is just how it's going to be.
I think we're in that period, how it's going to be for a moment. But we are trying to change and streamline it as we go through the process. And thankfully we have a good contractor. We have Child Care Group that is doing very good in the transitioning of this. And it's requiring us to do things a little bit different and adding a little bit more on our team as well. But I think as of right now, we're just trying to see where it kind of levels out, and we will need that eventually.
Susan, my first thought was to call Reagan, but I realized all of this is culminating in her shop. This is so uncharacteristic of her work. I was shocked. So they're either working from legislative intent or they are working from data collection. I'm not really sure what's driving it. I will call Reagan and find out if she can give me any insight as to why we need to make it so difficult. But we're going to drop more and more of the centers from the STAR process. It's just incredibly difficult in COVID to resort to this.
Yeah. So yes, I'd be very interested in what she's able to tell you. Yeah.
B, was the other item our prioritization, our 3 categories?
We could go there.
What else do you have? Because I
I
know
think the next was revisions, Texas Rising Star revision status report, and then finally was childcare allocations. Those were
Yes.
the last two.
And so on the revisions, I can quickly go through that really. We know that the major changes was on the criteria, the categories. We went from 5 categories now to 4. We had to adjust the weighting system. And most of the weight is on teacher-child interaction. Now it's 40% of the evaluation criteria, which is good. That's very important right now. The requirements for the Texas Rising Star assessors, with them having to be certified now, they have to go through a certification process. The mentors have a similar process, not as intensive as the assessors. So those are new developments in the changes to the program. And I think all this is an attempt to lead the state in making it centralized, the assessor centralized, coming from the state entity. So that's going to be a challenge in itself with having assessors apply for an actual full-time position with the state or some other entity that the state will contract it with, will be a little challenging. And we'll see that shift, and it will affect how our process of reassessing and putting people on Texas Rising Star pathway. It will be a little bit different.
Dee, what is the timeline to take our regional assessors and they will become a state assembled assessor group? What is the state now looking at? 2023?
It was 2022, but I think it is going to be moving to 2023.
If we got there faster, perhaps they would minimize the red tape after they have to deal with it. But I do think they're trying to make it an extremely hefty, credentialed, consistent activity. And I appreciate that. I really do. I've gone through all the complaints about this assessor acts this way, this assessor's better. But oh my goodness, the growing pains, and to put that on us before they centralize it at the state level, I think is unfortunate. But I think they're pulling it all together to make advocates aware of all the good they can do. But if it creates less quality availability, well, that's not what the intent was. So that's my concern.
Well, the timing is such a challenge too, because I think in the best of worlds, which, you know, I'm trying hard to think about when the best of worlds has been in this industry. At any rate, if you had all things great, that makes a lot of sense. When you have a continuing crisis, which is, you know, we don't have enough people in field, we don't have enough people to fill the demand, we've got a worker crisis, and then on top of that, I mean, the quality crisis has not gone away, but we've made it harder. You know, it's thinking through, should we be stepping back and cadencing our response rather than trying to throw it all at once? Because it's, you know, that's just challenging to try and I mean, I'm not even able to describe how much of a mess I think that sounds like, but that's just, you know, yeah.
A simple one might be to waiver that we continue reimbursing anyone who was a 4-star, 3-star during this period. We continue paying them at that rate, regardless of the red tape and how that's coming out. It shouldn't interfere with the local model that was working. Influence people, but I'd hate to drop anybody's reimbursement rate based upon the levers that I'm hearing, because my God, if it takes you an hour and a half to explain it, it probably is a little saddled. It could be a little streamlined there. It was upsetting to hear it.
Yeah, and if you change somebody's reimbursement rate, let's say it's a center that's somewhat stable and doesn't have the staffing challenges, and this is just, you know, I don't know that this is true or not, but just let's pretend this for the case of argument, that they didn't have the same type of employment challenges because they were able to pay their staff a little bit more. But now all of a sudden I yank their status away, and I've thrown them right back into the same pool as everybody else. That doesn't seem like a real good idea.
Let's see if that's what's driving the train and see what Reagan thinks is possible.
Yeah.
It's worth the effort. Sorry, Dee, continue.
No, it's okay. So there's no other questions with that. Here we go with money for the FY 2022 child care allocation with our local match targets. So we, in our child care development fund allocation, we have seen a $6.5 million increase this year on our regular allocation. So that'll put us at 89 million, a little over 89 million. And you'll see the quality money that's attached to that. This year we have 1.7 million. And then with our CCM money, we got, it's kind of broken out, kind of weird the way it's laid out with the state, but we have 9 million for local match. Our target is 4.5 mil. So our CCF dollars in itself is 78, a little bit below 79 million. But when you put in quality and everything else, we're at 89. So what you'll see down at the bottom is our allocation with CCF, CCM, and quality is 89 million. I don't know if you remember, we got 2.8 million from North Central. We actually got more than that. Lori, I can't remember, it's a little bit over 5 million.
It's 10 million separated over 3 years.
So here's the 2.8 that's coming from that'll be added in FY 2022. And then last month, is that just last month? Oh gosh, in June, we were able to take 12.5 million from our FY 2021 allocation and move it forward to FY 2022. So with those additions, our full allocation with those modifications will be 105 million for this year.
And that equates to how many kids in care?
Well, with our CCF, we're looking at the tentative target is 12,887, but we have not gotten the final number yet. That's the count for FY 2022. That was a tentative target that we received in the.
And it's less than the number of kids we have in care today.
It is, our target right now is 11,516. So it will go up a little bit, and we're expecting that.
But it's still fewer slots than the kids we're transferring into the new year, potentially.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And in addition to the 105 million, we have the 55 million.
Yes, ma'am. The 55 million and the 3.3 for quality.
And the 55 comes with 5,700 units.
Yes, that's outside of this. Yes.
Right. It's
12,000 plus 5,500. If you add in the service industry, it's closer to
It's 60, 160. Oh, a little bit over that. 160 million plus.
Unprecedented resources, and to see that the resources do not solve the problems is frustrating.
It is.
Talking about match, how much match did we have to reach this current year? Looking at that 4.504,956, how much?
It was pretty much the same, 4.5, pretty much.
And we had to not borrow, but share matching costs with Tarrant County this year.
Yes, we did there. And also North Texas.
Well, I thought we cleared that one.
We did.
Okay.
It was a temporary fix.
The short this year was how much of the Tarrant County money? 300,000?
300 and a little bit over 300,000.
Okay. So who are our guaranteed partners for match this year, since we're at the front end? We know the College District and DISD.
Richardson ISD, Irving ISD, and we have the city of Dallas and the city of Mesquite. Those are guarantees. We've been working with the city of Irving. I hope to get that executed this year. We worked with them most of last year and we couldn't make it happen. We will see reductions from some of our existing partners. So anyone we need to reach out to, we would love to have some feedback, and we will go try to build that relationship.
The reason we would have reductions, remember that an ISD and a city have to guarantee a certain level of utilization of their own money. And I think in COVID, we all learned that the utilization of money declined. So
Right.
they're going to come in with a slightly reduced expectation, thinking, I think 2 months ago, they'd have told us we're back. But now with the variant, everything is pulling back. I saw today another major event being virtualized. We're seeing it every day. And so people are getting more apprehensive of being fully in person, and that will affect, even in the schools, that will affect the utilization of money that counts toward this. Observations, questions? It's unprecedented money in childcare. Unprecedented. It's crazy. Moving on, Dee.
That's pretty much all I have. If we want to talk about priority of services, we could do
Put the
that.
priorities up and let's get
Okay.
that talked through. That was Tori's issue. And I do want to touch on what's available to us and just get a response. I know we're down. Is Alan still with us? He may be just
I'm
off.
here. Yeah.
Okay, good. So we've only lost Ken, so we've still got time to talk about this. Priority is set by the state, and you can understand why. There's much bigger demand than we have funds to meet. But for subsidizing someone's childcare, the care of their children, we have to go through a formula from the state and decide, everybody in category 1 hits first. This would be our choicest population, people on TANF, either of those, people in food stamps. We then get a second category that the state compels us to follow. We only get, as a board, the board can assign a third priority group. And I specifically want to go through what's in each category. I think it'd be informative. Tori was asking us to add childcare employee, someone who works in the childcare system, to the priority listing so their childcare could be paid. And I just don't think we're going to get to the third priority group based upon all of this money, all of the populations that we must serve first. And the fact Sherry told me 2,000, I was actually going with 1,000 on the wait list. So looking, and Dee, it's not coming up.
Oh, you don't see, okay, I'm sorry. I thought I was sharing. Let me stop sharing the other and put in the other.
Got to pivot off and back up. Here we go.
Okay, sorry about that.
Go scroll up to the first priority group real quick because I didn't hit them all. All right. Choices, temporary assistance to needy families, supplemental nutrition, at-risk children. That tops the list in every case. Then you go to the second priority, children who meet and receive protective services. We actually receive separate money for protective services, but it's still a priority population. Children of qualified veterans, qualified spouse, children of foster youth, children experiencing homelessness, very important. Children of parents in military deployment, children of teen parents, children with disabilities. Now, all of that has to be satisfied. If there's a slot opening, anyone who falls in priority group 1 or 2 must get first call. Now, a lot of times they may not come back. They may not put in their data. They may lapse when the calls are made and they won't answer the calls come in on the list. That moves it on down. But to get to this third priority is very concerning to me. So Dee, third priority, and this is what we do right now.
This is not what we do. We have that. So let me make sure.
It's not what we do.
Hold on.
These were our this is the Dallas board priority groups. No.
That is, we have siblings that's not on there. Let me pull that one up. Is it on there?
I think that's an old policy.
That's an old one. So I pulled up the wrong one.
Okay.
Sorry. I'll tell you what it is. Give me a second. We have the priorities with the siblings and Head Start and what we want, what Tori is talking about adding is a little bit different from what we have on there.
Working in the childcare industry, first of all, the reason she wanted to add it was maybe it would help us entice more people to work in the system. I only think that goes so far as we can make that commitment. And because it's third priority and it can't be top of the list based upon what's in third priority, I find it hard to think that we would make good on that promise and then we would be criticized for not being able to fulfill that promise. We can't bypass the upper priorities. So can we see the third priority list now? It's not up here.
No, it's not.
So basically what you're saying, we already have a waiting list of 2,000 kids. These two first categories have got to be satisfied. So the third priorities have got already some if we're adding another one in there, we're unlikely you'd ever get to that. It's just, and so if we put it in just to, you know, as a token to put it in, then the risk of looking like, you know, you put something in there, but you didn't ever fulfill on it is a big challenge.
Yeah.
The intent, I think, is, I absolutely understand the intent, but I think the impact of not being able to meet that expectation would be pretty treacherous.
Absolutely. I do think though that the case is worth taking up, but I don't think we can do it in this way. So my alternative to Tori is actively recruit from the first priority list to influence people to work in the system and cover their childcare, making it known to them. You have no second bus to get. You go to the childcare center, you bring your child. You're going to be covered and you're going to have a check. And you don't have to go back and forth between employment and childcare. It's a routine that a young adult could fall into. And that really was my concern. Young women with first child, if we could just prioritize them off of the high priority customer, the customer that's sitting in line, maybe that would work. I think the industry discussion, I'm pleased that they made an effort for the service industry, but I think it leads us to a very interesting place of confusion and complaint from other industries.
So I totally agree. This goes back to the comment earlier. We tend to jump to policy before we've tested anything. I don't see why somebody couldn't run a small test to see if you were offering somebody free childcare, whether or not that would actually entice them to take a role and whether it enticed them to stay in the role. And so maybe childcare group might want to lead the way on a test of just a couple places so that we could have this conversation in 6 months informed.
And I offered that we could even supplement with WIOA funding out of our youth program. As you know, we were having trouble spending that. So what if we put more childcare money available just for a handful? Let's understand, does it really grab? Does it last? Will they hold the job to second quarter? Can we infuse it with the credential exercise? So let's get something happening where we can point to it and ask the state to give us the ability to make that happen.
If I could just jump in here, I hate to play devil's advocate here, but I just want to make sure that, you know, they get a job in a, you know, let's just say we put somebody on TANF, they get a job in a childcare program, we're going to pay them. You know, they just don't make enough money, and you know, then they get their TANF denied. I just want to be careful that they're not going to fall off that cliff, right? With a low paying job.
I think it's a great point, and I think the point I'd make is what you've articulated is that there's a lot of dependencies, and making this one move is unlikely to eliminate those other dependencies. So, I mean, I think that the question is there something that we can test that sort of actually solves the problem we're trying to solve, or does solving one problem just lead us to another set of problems? And so it doesn't sound like we have a lot of confidence that if we do this, that we're actually solving the problem it's intended to, even though the intentions are great and is a problem that does need a solution at some point.
Yeah, and Sherry, we could concentrate on people who are now in job search, in TANF, and in food stamps, and they're going to lose their grant anyway if they don't take a job.
Now that's true. That's a very good point. You know, and you know, we could test it and see. Yeah, it all goes back to Tori's original wage issue, right? The conversation. You know, if they could get a job at making $15 an hour, that's great.
Unless the convenience of this overrides, and that's why I brought that up. It's not, I drop off my child at a childcare, then I have to go to a job, then I have to reverse that at the end of the day. It's, I go, my child goes with. For people who can't bear any other stress, it just might, like Ken brought up, a lot of it is circumstance and convenience and comfort. And people are not wanting to make that extra, pardon the pun, but go that extra mile. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I was just saying, we should also test funding thresholds. I mean, I'm happy to work to rally philanthropy to run some. Well, I think we need to know, would $14 an hour stabilize? Would 16? Would 18? What's it really going to take to stabilize, or at least a good faith idea of what it's going to take to stabilize them? Just with a couple centers, like if we were to offer $17 an hour, would we actually eliminate the churn, or is it something else that's happening here?
Yeah, I think that you need to get up to the threshold, because to Sherry's point, you know, really $15 an hour is still probably, you know, barely above poverty level. I mean,
Yeah.
7 minutes. So what's a point that is actually going to lead somebody to at least, if not economic mobility, at least financial stability? Because otherwise, I think we might just be moving, you know, this is a terrible thing to say, but moving deck chairs around on the Titanic, which doesn't seem like.
And we look at naturally varying salaries just to see if there are any patterns there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a pilot is a great idea, but maybe we've got some information we already have that we could work.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I feel like it's probably unlikely we do have information at that high of a salary range, just from hearing that the YMCA is paying, you know, 11, 12, and that's a pretty, you know, pretty established organization. It's hard for me to believe that a lot of independents are paying at the 17, 18, 19, but you're 100% right, Stephanie.
Yeah. See what exists.
See what's out there,
yeah.
and then we can
Mhm.
vary it.
Yeah, and of course, we just got to this as an offshoot, thinking we can't, you know, if we can't raise wages through the American Rescue Plan money, you know, what are the options? So that's kind of how we got to this, as another alternative. But back to Alan's point about a pilot, one of the things that we have talked about is taking a childcare desert where there's a high need, there's not a sufficient supply of providers, but if we target high need areas and say, could we run a pilot where we pay very attractive wages, and let's couple that with, let's look at your teacher turnover rate, and let's do some benchmarking at the beginning. And if we provide enough, you know, consistency so that providers can pay a consistent wage for a period of time, do we reduce turnover? Do we help the center get full and stay full? Can we do any benchmarking about the child assessment, or their ability to progress when they have a stable teacher in their classroom over the course of a year? So
Tori jumped to the panacea. Tori, we can't, if we measure too many things at one time, we lose the point. So I can think of 100 ways that will fail that had nothing to do with the two conversations we're having today. So I want to encourage you. Yes, I know that's where we need to go, but we do need to solve this workforce immediate situation in terms of how, is there anything we can do to fortify the immediate problem? We do not have a competitive workforce. We can't pay competitive wages. We can't hold on to, so I love it. You know, I do. And you and I can energize on it, but we can confuse what we're trying to accomplish, I think, if we don't pick one or two things to concentrate on just to get past this. What I am going to do, Susan, is pull as much as I can from Richard in the work in Texas on posted jobs in childcare across Texas. It's a fluke, perhaps. I'm going to also introduce it in a call with my peers tomorrow. They've asked me to add it to the agenda to have everybody go out and look at the workforce conversation in their childcare. So I'm going to pick up those two pieces as fast as I can. Dee, I think we're done with that slide.
and this is not for this discussion, but at some point, I see a big similarity between the shortage in this area and the shortage that we have in classrooms in schools. And
Yes,
so
ma'am.
there are a number of things that have been tried in classrooms to recruit and retain teachers that you might want to look at that list to see if there's anything there that we could piggyback on.
True. No, I agree. In fact, I had a discussion with Suzanne at the DISD and Derek and a few others about our workforce system, helping them. We've gone through to identify every degree person that's currently on unemployment or sitting it out, to give them information on applying for an alternative certification or coming to the schools. We've also talked about part-time work, such as Ken alluded to. For anyone out there who's looking for that supplement, they're doing paid tutors now
Yes.
for many of their kids, and we're looking at who we might have that would take those jobs. So a lot can be discerned from our job bank, I think. And Alan's having to jump off too. It's definitely 2:30. I'm going to quit. But all great ideas, ladies. Thank you so much.
No, thanks so much. Yeah, lots. So if we can start with the data, the information we do have, glean, I think, Rhonda, you said from surveys that you've got. And then Lori, the intelligence you can get from your calls, looking at work in Texas, and then also, anything that Reagan at TWC can tell you. I think that's, phenomenal in terms of the amount of money that is coming into childcare. I can't say enough about the good things about the work childcare group has done. I mean, my gosh, you guys, you continually amaze me at what a tremendous job you do, and you as well. I mean, this is something, and we've got a lot of smart people around the table here, and I am very hopeful that we can figure out some things that will get us both at a short-term solution, but also looking at this long-term as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Are we adjourned, Madam Chair?
You are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll try to get it out before the next meeting. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
You.